My name is Ella Winters. 3 hours ago, I died in a car accident. Then I woke up laying in a four-poster bed that wasn't mine, silk canopy, hand-embroidered curtains, and outside the window a French geometric garden. It took me 2 minutes to confirm. I had transmarted into a book, into a tragic romance novel I'd dropped halfway through, Winter's Love. I was the villainess with a 3-part job: frame the heroine, seduce the male lead, and die by jumping off a housing alone. Just as I finished thinking that, a voice exploded in my head.
Plot deviation 0%, villainous death countdown 180 days. Prost, complete plot point garden wine spill to extend countdown by 30 days. Warning, when countdown reaches a hero character will be enforced the exit minutes 58 jumping minutes 12 seconds.
It was still ticking.
I laughed. The Ella in the original novel died from stupidity. I wasn't. I got out of bed and walked to the mirror. The person in it had a pretty but tired face, dark circles under her eyes, and a mouth that naturally turned down as if she was always angry. You write your script, I'll live my life.
The person in the mirror didn't answer.
Death countdown, 179 days, 23 minutes. Please arrive on minutes.
I didn't do my makeup, didn't change into a gown, didn't put on perfume. I walked downstairs in my robe, grabbed a piece of chocolate from the kitchen, then walked to the garden gate and pushed open the worn iron door. In the night, Alexander Blake stood under the moonlight, dark coat, thin lips pressed together, eyes sharp as broken ice. The first moment he saw me, his brow crowled.
Ella Winters, you're 17 minutes late.
I bit into the chocolate, chewed, swallowed, and then spoke. I changed my mind.
What?
I'm not playing the villainess in your script anymore. Find someone else. He froze for a second. That was the first time in his life he'd ever frozen.
Then he let out a cold laugh.
What trick are you trying to pull now?
I stuffed the remaining half of the chocolate into my mouth, turned, and walked back.
Ella!
I didn't look back. I just raised my hand and waved it behind me.
I closed the door, my back against the door panel, the chocolate still not fully melted in my mouth, sweet. But that number in my head kept ticking. I closed my eyes and said to myself, then let's see, whether you kill me first or I live as myself first.
The next morning, a red floating marker appeared in the upper right corner of my vision, D1792347, like a scar I couldn't shake off. I tried to ignore it, but the system clearly wasn't going to let me off. I was sitting in the kitchen eating toast. When I saw this quest, the bread nearly fell from my hand. I'm not doing it. I stuffed the toast into my mouth and chewed hard. But I felt something change. The sunlight outside dimmed by a degree. Not overcast, but something the world's saturation had been turned down a notch.
Miss, there is a guest.
10 bell lay rang, but Len Isabella white dress, blue ribbon, carrying a basket of cookies.
She stood in the living room timid, like a fawn ready to rolt at any moment.
I bakes Winter's lemon
Her
cookies.
voice thin as thread.
In the original novel, I was supposed to sneer, knock the basket over, and say, "How dare you offer me something so low class?" And she'd run off crying. Alexander would see her in the hallway, feel sorry for her, and begin his first flicker of pity. I looked into her eyes large and clear, with no malice, only nervousness.
I took the basket. Thank you. She froze. Like a fawn being petted, her whole body went stiff.
You said thank you?
I picked one up and took a bite. Delicious. Better than my chef's. She stood there, didn't have this reaction. Scripts was if the whole world had suddenly slipped out of alignment. Plot corrector? I asked in my mind.
No comment, but it is recommended you complete daily quests on time. I looked down at the lemon cookie in my hand, crumbs sticking to my fingertips. I licked off the crumbs. Teach me how flour in the kitchen. She smiled. That was the first real smile I'd seen in this world. And in my hands I had a basket of cookies and a little fawn willing to learn baking with me. On the third day, Isabella came, with flour and more lemons. She stood in the kitchen off, not knowing where to stand, what to touch, whether she should speak. I handed her an apron.
Put it on, flour gets everywhere.
She took it, her fingers looping around the cotton ties 3 times before she tied it. I watched her clumsy movements and didn't laugh.
In the original novel, she never entered the kitchen, always the protected guarantee, but now she stood at my counter, palms her stew tea for someone to bring tea.
Miss Winters, what you said yesterday.
Which part?
But you said you wouldn't be a gist anymore. It's
To circle someone the drowned, you're a skeep. Step outside and you're a person. She didn't argue. She shaped the dough into a not quite round ball and placed it on the tray. Our first batch of cookies went into the oven. 10 minutes later, the lemon scent seeped through the gaps in the metal and filled the entire kitchen. Isabella stood in front of the oven, her face flushed from the heat. Just then, footsteps sounded from the hallway. Alexander appeared at the kitchen door. He wore a white shirt, sleeves rolled to his forearms, hands covered in flour, sugar and lemon zest scattered over the counter.
What are you doing?
Isabella instinctively shrank back half a step.
Baking cookies. Do you want one?
I did. He stared at me. That look held wariness, confusion, and something deeper he didn't want to admit. A sense of losing control. He didn't know what to do with me.
The Ella in the original novel was like a cat forever chasing his tail, impossible to drive away or scold off. But now I sat in the kitchen, barely even glancing at him. He walked in from the doorway,
You
stood
never
across
used to
the
do
counter and looked down at the row of raw
You'd
dough.
never
Used to stand in the kitchen either.
He didn't answer. He just stood there, watching her move around the kitchen like she'd been doing it her whole life. I took the first tray out of the oven, heat rushing into my face.
Try it, but fair warning. This wasn't made for you, you just happened to pass by. He didn't pick it up immediately. But he didn't leave either. His hand rested on the table for a moment. Then he picked up the cookie and took a bite. His chewing was minimal, as if tasting something he wasn't sure was worth judging.
Sour.
It's lemon, of course it's sour. I turned and slid the second tray into the oven. He stood there, still holding the other half of the cookie. Didn't throw it away, didn't put it down. He didn't say it was good, but he finished the remaining half. Through the oven's glass door, I saw him set down the saucer and turn to walk out. His silhouette turned the corner at the end of the hallway and disappeared. He didn't say it was good, but he finished the remaining half. The system's number flickered in the upper right. Death Novre. He plat countdown of cadena count hours, 4 hours, 2 minutes. I closed the prompt.
He ate it.
Saw that.
He never used to eat anything you.
That was before. The cookies in the oven bran were starting to brown. I crouched down and watched them slowly turn golden through the glass. 169 days. Still 169 at the edges.
In the original novel, there was a famous rainy love triangle scene. The male lead rushes into the rain to save the heroine, while the villainess stands by sneering and gets shoved aside by him. Sure enough, it rained late last night. I wrapped my robe around me and walked to the window, seeing a figure standing in the garden. Isabella, without an umbrella. According to the original novel, I was supposed to go down, pretend to care for her, but actually lock her in the garden shed. I sighed, grabbed an umbrella and a dry blanket, and walked downstairs.
When Isabella saw me, she froze. I held the umbrella over her head. Why are you in the garden at midnight?
He and I argued. He said I shouldn't keep coming to see you.
He's an idiot. I draped the blanket over her shoulders. Come inside. I'll make you. Followed me into the kitchen, sat on a bar stool, shivering in the blanket.
I made 2 cups of hot chocolate with marshmallows. She took a sip, and her eyes reddened.
Ella, why are you so kind to me? You're supposed to hate me.
Who says?
Everyone. Alexander, his family, everyone in this city. They all think I should hate you.
I looked at her.
They're wrong. You don't deserve hate. You're just too kind, so kind that everyone wants to use you. I choose not to.
The next morning, Alexander knocked on my door. His hair was wet, rain marks on his coat. He'd probably searched all night. He stood at the door, saw Isabella
her in?
peeking out from the living room, wrapped in the blanket, and his expression changed.
Yes. Are you taking her away?
I held my coffee cup.
He paused.
She can leave on her own.
I'm not leaving. Ella's hot chocolate is delicious. I'm staying until noon.
No one is following the plan. I held my coffee cup, looking at that line. Plot corrector. 72 hours. I didn't know what that was. I swiped away that warning. Let it be whatever it is. I'll deal with it when it comes.
3 days later, at dusk, the plot corrector came. It wasn't a person, it was a gust of wind. To be precise, all the roses in the suddenly bent in one direction as if an invisible hand had pressed the same switch. Then the air before me began to ripple like water, and a woman's voice came from those ripples. Neither male nor male, dividend of warmth. Who are you?
Plot corrector, serial number 007, responsible for maintaining the narrative integrity of this world.
Its voice was like 2 slabs of stone grinding together.
You shouldn't be here. You should be spilling wine on page 47, poisoning on page 82, and jumping off a building on page 104.
I placed the sheaves on the ground.
Then you can leave. I'm not jumping.
The ripples shuddered violently.
DV exceeding 30% will trigger forced correction, at which point you will lose your current memories and reload the original character's
My
personality.
fingers tight and lose my memories, become that Ella again, the one who hated and was hated every day, who finally jumped from the windowsill.
I took a deep breath.
Then come and try. See if I'll jump a second time.
The gust of wind vanished. The roses stood upright again. The air returned to calm. But the system's number had changed. A new small red line appeared beside the countdown in the upper right.
I stood in the garden, the setting sun stretching the roses' shadows long. Alexander walked over from the Hittermore coffin lately, but he coming said at the garden was to see me.
The wind was strong just now.
He biscued beside the row of bent stems.
Yes. Very strong.
He didn't ask more, but he bent down, picked up the pruning shears I'd left on the ground, and handed them back to me. His touched my fingertips. 1 second.
Isabella coming tomorrow? I'll have the kitchen prepare an extra cup of tea.
He said it and turned away. I spit. Prepare to erase me in 29 days, but at this someone remembered to prepare an extra cup of tea.
I started writing letters to the original novel's readers. Not as a character writing to characters, but as Ella Winters writing to everyone in this world who had read Winter's Love. That letter was printed in the corner of the next day's newspaper, under the headline, Miss Wynn's Statement. When I saw it, I was eating breakfast and nearly choked on my milk.
Alexander sat across from me. He'd been appearing at my table frequently lately.
You wrote that?
Yes.
Do you know what you're saying?
I know. I'm saying I don't want to be the villain anymore.
Then what's your role?
No role. I'm just me.
You used to want to be Mrs. Blake.
That was before. Now I prefer being someone who has cookies to eat.
He looked down at the coffee and in his cup.
but I felt him reorganizing his mental categories for me. That letter had probably emptied that folder. Maybe he was building a new one but hadn't figured out what to name it yet.
I closed that notification. 26 days. Still enough time to bake any batches of cookies.
Isabella officially became a regular in my kitchen. Every Wednesday afternoon she came, bringing recipes, ingredients, and the excitement of this week I learned a new filling. I taught her how to use the oven's convection setting, and she taught me how to make her grandmother's apple crust. Whenever our creations were brought to the table, Alexander always happened to pass by.
Once he stood at the kitchen door and asked,
Can I try one?
Isabella glanced at me, and I nodded. He picked up an apple crisp, took a bite.
Too sweet.
Isabella's face turned red. I leaned against the counter. If it's too sweet, you don't have to eat it.
But I want to eat it.
He put down the half-eaten apple crisp and walked away. Isabella whispered,
Is he angry? No. He's learning how to admit what he wants.
That night I sat on my bedroom windowsill, looking at the garden lamppost. Alexander stood beneath the lamphold and looked on up at my window. I didn't draw the curtains. He didn't look away either. We held each other's guidance across 2 floors and a garden for 3 seconds. He fells for a second, then lowered his head and put the unlit cigarette back in his pocket. In the original Salshore, this scene was supposed to be him losing sleep over in the garden. But he was looking at my window. The system's number flickered. With 3 days. I draw the curtains and lie by trong. Alad wahaus play me. He may likai. What didn't go out.
Isabella wimple blue dress. Not most eyesight spotting. I stood in a corner with an untouched glass of champagne before me. Isabella wore a light purple dress, nervously a coppily clip her clutch. Alexander was in the middle of the room talking to someone. In the original novel, there was an important scene. At the ball, the villainess would spill wine on the heroine's dress in front of everyone. In the original novel, I was supposed to act before the third dance began.
I carried that glass of champagne, walked across the entire hall, and stopped in front of Isabella. Everyone's eyes focused on us like spotlights. Isabella's shoulders flinched.
I raised the champagne glass and said to her, To you. To your beauty tonight. To you not needing to fear anyone. I drank the champagne, then I placed the empty glass back on the waiter's tray and turned back to my corner. The whole hall was silent for a few seconds, everyone waiting for the sound of wine being spilled. But there was none. Alexander walked across the hall to me.
Why didn't you spill it?
Why would I?
Because you were supposed to.
Who wrote the script? You? Then you act. I won't.
I looked up into his eyes.
Then you come play the person beside me. Not the villainess. The one who stands with me until the end.
I looked at him for 2 seconds. I just finished a glass of wine. Don't overthink it. The wind on my face was cool. In the original novel, this ball ended in chaos. But behind me, there was only quiet music, and Alexander stood beside me and one person's gaze away. He didn't speak.
It's cold out here.
I know.
You're not going in?
Just a little longer. He took off his coat and draped it over my shoulders. Dark gray cashmere. He turned and walked back into the hall. I stood on the balcony, that coat wrapped around my shoulders 19 days. But the coat was warm.
After the ball, social circles started spreading a new saying. Winters has changed, she's become more human. I wasn't sure if that was a compliment, but at least no one whispered that's the vicious woman when I passed by anymore. I went to Timon's for measurement.
I've altered that dark red gown you ordered last year, suit how you look now.
And the proprietress said as she poured me tea,
She didn't know what fit her than before. Not as tight, not as flashy, like a new dress made for me. I've even looked at myself. I didn't know what she meant by how you look now. But I put on that dress. It fit better than before. The proprietor softly clapped behind me. That night I wrote in my diary, I haven't done any villainous duties for a month. But the world hasn't collapsed. Isabella Kazander is still alive. It just took another path, following me. After writing, I turned to the last page of the diary and drew a countdown in the blank space, 18 days. Then I closed the book and blew out the candle. Outside, the roses were not bent. No wind, no corrector. Tonight, nothing happened. Alexander came to see me more and more often. But he never said it was to see me. He would take a walk in the garden, look for a book in the library, or just happen to pass by in the hallway.
Once he just happened to pass by my door, holding a folded left piece of paper. He handed it to me and
My
said,
place last time.
I opened it. It was the recipe I'd written for Isabella.
This is your handwriting.
Yes, it's mine.
You left it in my study last time.
I never went to your study.
Then you did.
I didn't.
Then how did
I
it
looked
get
down at the recipe, a small folded corner with a bit of flour dust on it. Maybe you took it yourself. He didn't deny it. He just placed the recipe back in my hand.
That new filling recipe you wrote, next time you make it, can I try a piece?
Yes, but don't say too sweet again.
I'll say just right.
He left. I stood in the doorway, holding that recipe. On the corner, he'd added a small line in perk for better results. I smiled and didn't erase that line.
The system's number flinkled at the edge of my vision. 16 days. I looked down at that pencil line. He said just right. I took the recipe into the kitchen and took down the flour canister.
Next time he came, I'd make it according to his adjusted recipe.
Because I also wanted to know if 10 grams less flour would be better. Isabella started falling in love not with Alexander but with a young gardener who had no role in the original novel. His name was Thomas, a man of few words, always carrying pruning shippers. They met in my garden. Isabella crouched them by the rosebush to prune, while Thomas busted her heads close. Isabella's laughter drifted up from below, light and crisp. I didn't go down to interrupt.
Alexander stood at the other end of the hallway and saw it too. He walked over, stood beside me, and followed my gaze down.
Her and him?
Yes.
You don't mind?
Why would I? As long as she's happy.
Alexander was silent for a moment.
You used to want her to die alone.
I turned to look at him.
That was the old Ella. The current Ella thinks she deserves someone who helps her hold up the rose branches.
He didn't speak. The system popped up a new line.
That evening when I went down to the garden, I saw Alexander standing alone in front of the red roses, helped Isabella and Thomas trim the excess side branches. I watched from the hallway for a while. In the original novel, he was always the flower branch apart in rage. Now he held pruning scissors and snipped quietly and earnestly. He didn't see me. He did it with no expression on his face, not ingratiating, not performing. He just thought those side branches needed cutting. When he finished, he stood up, brushed the leaves off his hands, and walked away. I stayed where I was. The rose bush had fewer stray branches, and the remaining buds stood taller than them before. I walked over and touched one of them. It hadn't bloomed yet, but it would soon. I fell asleep on the garden bench. Not on purpose, but the sunlight was so nice that I closed my eyes halfway through my book. When I woke up, there was an extra coat on me. Dark gray, cashmere, smelling of cedar. Not mine. I sat up and saw Alexander standing 2 meters away, holding my book. He wasn't reading it. He was looking at me.
You put it on me?
The wind picked up. You'd catch a cold sleeping out here.
I folded the coat and handed it back to him.
Thank you.
He took the coat but didn't put it on immediately. He draped it over his arm, like holding something that shouldn't have been returned.
You called out a name in your sleep.
Whose name?
You don't know?
No, I was too deep asleep.
You called out yourself.
I called my own name?
Yes. You said, Ella, wake up. Are you afraid you won't wake up?
I used to be. Not anymore. Because a coat. He didn't press me on what because there's a coat meant, but he draped the coat back over my shoulders and gently pressed my shoulder.
Next time you sleep, bring it with you.
He walked away. I sat on the bench, that coat wrapped around my shoulders. The sun had shifted west, and the wind was indeed cooler. But I had no intention of returning the coat to him, at least not today.
The system flickered at the edge of my vision, then went dark. That line of numbers was silence for a few seconds before reappearing. Cannot be categorized.
Good. Then don't categorize it.
I received a letter. The sender's signature was the original author. I stared at that name for a long time. In this world, she was a real person. I have heard of your recent actions. You have deviated from every path I wrote. This confuses me and also makes me curious. Can you come see me?
An elderly novelist living in an old house on the skirts of town. I folded the letter and put it in my pocket. I didn't tell anyone. The next afternoon, I took a carriage to the outskirts. The old house was gray with ivy covering the walls. I walked up to the door and pulled the bell. I noted a white-haired old woman stood in the doorway.
You are Ella Winters.
I am.
You're calmer than I imagined. Come in.
She invited me in, tea already brewed. We sat face to face, steam rising from our cups in the afternoon light.
Aren't you following what I wrote?
Because the Ella in your script, she lived too tired. Scheming every day, hating every day. In the end, she died. I don't want to die, and I don't want to be tired.
Then what do you want?
To live. Maybe even to be happy.
But you're not real.
And you? Are you real?
She was silent for a long time, then let out a laugh. That laugh was short, but deep.
Go. I can't change the ending, but you can.
When I left that gray old house, it started to rain. I didn't take an umbrella. Rain fell on my face, cool. I was thinking about one thing. She said, you're not real. Someone would put a coat over me. That coat was warm. If it were fake, that warmth wouldn't feel so tangible.
As I walked back to my carriage, I saw a black carriage stopped across the road. The door opened, and Alexander stepped out, holding an umbrella. He walked through the rain to me.
How did you get here?
You left without telling me.
I didn't know you cared.
I care.
He raised the umbrella over my head. The rain was blocked. In the air, only his cedar scent and my own breathing remained. I looked up at him.
Am I real?
I asked. He looked down into my eyes.
You get cold, you get hungry, you call your own name in your sleep. You are real. The person who wrote you is gone. You are here. So you are real.
The system updated a line in the rain, but I didn't look at it. Under the umbrella, there were no numbers.
The night I got home, Isabella was sitting in the kitchen waiting for us. In front of her was a plate of freshly baked cookies and 3 glasses of milk. She didn't ask where I'd been, just pushed the cookie plate towards me. Try this new recipe. Half the sugar. Just right. She smiled.
I already turned off the oven for you.
Isabella waved at him. He ducked back out, and the door closed softly. Alexander stood at the kitchen door, looking at the 3 of us. His coat was still dripping, but he didn't go change. Aren't you having one?
I'll stand for a while.
You can eat standing up. I raised the cookie plate a little higher. He walked over and took one.
Not sweet anymore.
I told you. I changed the recipe. She smiled and lowered her head.
I sipped my milk beside them, watching this scene. The 3 main characters from the original novel, male-led, villainess. Now they were gathered around a kitchen table, sharing a plate of reduced sugar cookies. The rain outside was still falling. The ending isn't written in the book. No one was screaming in the how to dip. Who sits across from me tomorrow? Whether the roses bloom the day after. Those are what's real. The system flickered at the edge of my vision for a long time. Finally, it only popped up 2 lines. 43%, I said in my mind, then keep calculating. I'll go bake the next batch. I put down my milk glass and took the new recipe flour from Isabella's hands. I started learning to do meaningless things. Like sitting on the windowsill counting passing carriages and drawing what I ate for each meal in a notebook. These things had no plot-driving function. They wouldn't make the male lead look at me more, wouldn't make the Euron suffer, wouldn't push any conflict. That kind of quiet was something I only learned after transmating.
Counting carriages.
What do you do,
Alexander passed by the windowsill and saw me counting carriages.
Why?
Because blue carriages appeared 7 times today. Yesterday it was 4. I think tomorrow will be fewer. He stood below the windowsill, looking up at me.
You never used to notice this.
I used to be too busy. Busy hating you, hating Isabella, hating everyone. Now there's nothing to hate, so I have time to count carriages. He placed his hand on the windowsill edge.
What about red carriages?
None at all. Red isn't popular.
There will be tomorrow.
How do you know?
Because tomorrow I'll have someone change to a red horse.
He walked away. The next day, red carriages passed by my window, 7 of them. I sat on the windowsill and laughed. He stood in the garden and looked up at me.
I didn't wave and he didn't speak.
But I knew those 7 red carriages were arranged by him. It was a meaningless gesture, but I remembered. The system didn't pop up a notification. That countdown line hung quietly in the upper right. 6 days. I closed it and kept counting. The 8th red carriage passed at dusk and inside sat a person, Alexander. As he passed the window he tipped his hat as if to say number 8. I laughed out loud.
Isabella and Thomas got engaged. No grand ceremony, no newspaper headlines. When Isabella came to my house she held it was famous Ulfically beneath, but hers tries or eins. I put the invitation in my drawer.
I'll be there. Save the front row for me. I'll take care of the fruit tarst.
She hugged me. It was a very short hug, so short that when she let go her eyes were wet. I never knew you could be like this. I didn't expect it either. But it's nice.
An identical invitation appeared in Alexander's studio. He picked it up and looked at it.
Front row?
He asked himself.
Yes.
I'll sit in the 2nd row.
You can sit next to me,
I said.
Are you sure?
He looked up. There are 2 seats in the front row. You take the other one. He didn't say yes. The system flickered in the corner. 0. Not 80 anymore. I closed the notification and continued making the tart crust for the wedding.
I found an old handwritten recipe book in the kitchen with Winter's family written on the cover. When I opened it, there was a letter inside, written by the original me to herself. The handwriting was messy, with a few spots blurred by water stains. The letter said, "If you're reading this, it means you've become another me. I don't know who you are. I've always wanted to go, but I never took that step. See that C for me." I held that letter and stood there for a long time. The sunlight through the kitchen window fell on the paper, making those blurred words a little clearer. I folded the letter and put it in my chest pocket. Then I walked out of the kitchen, through the hallway, and to Alexander's door. He was reading documents.
I'm going to the sea.
When?
Now.
I'll go with you.
He closed the documents.
The carriage set off in the afternoon. Sunlight slanted through the carriage windows, falling on the wooden panels. Neither of us spoke, but the silence in the carriage was different from before. Now it was more like a road. The road was long, with ups and downs, but you knew it led somewhere. The sea arrived at dawn. The wind was strong, the water gray-blue surging in layers. I stood on the sand, took the letter from my pocket, and opened it. The wind ristled the pages. I didn't read it aloud, just looked it back in my pocket. I looked at the sea for a long time. Alexander stood behind me, silent.
After a while, he walked over and stood beside me.
Are you done reading?
Yes.
Then what are you looking at?
Looking to see if it's still there.
It won't go away.
I know.
But I wanted to confirm it for that Ella who wrote the letter. The sea was indeed still there. The part she never saw, I saw.
The system lit up a line at the edge of my vision. I closed that line. The wind blew from the sea, and Alexander's coat was once again on my shoulders. This time I didn't say thank you.
After wedding, to Thomas's cottage, about half an hour's carriage ride from my house. She still came every Wednesday, but no longer brought recipes. She brought her own baked bread, a jar of jam or flowers cut from her garden. She brought a small sprig of basil and put it in a cup on my kitchen window sit. The green leaves curled at the edges in the sunline, but they perked up every day. One day, as she sat down for tea, she suddenly said,
Ella, have you thought about what comes next?
"Next? Living."
Not that kind of next. With Alexander, he comes to your garden every day. The whole city is talking about you two.
I put down my teacup. What are they saying?
That you're together.
We're not together. Then what are you doing? Sunbathing, counting carriages, going to the sea? That is being together. I didn't deny it, because she was right. There was indeed only a very blurry line between things and being together. I hadn't crossed it, but I hadn't stepped back either. I stood beside that line, looked at it for a while, then I went back to drinking my tea. The red count corner line in the upper left turned into one day today. It didn't pop up any more warnings. Maybe it also knew that when tomorrow came, I would no longer be the Ella it know.
And Yunaras Vaga, Lady Blake, and all that is always pulling strings behind the scenes, and we deviated too far from the script.
Madam, Lady Blake has arrived.
Butcher came to announce her. Black carriage stopped at my door.
Show her in.
When Lady Blake walked into the living room, I was sitting on the sofa, still dust with flour on my apron. She scanned me.
You're messier than what was written in the book.
You're meaner than what was written.
Her eyebrow lifted.
You know who I am?
I know. You're the one who shoved the script at me.
Then you're not afraid of me?
Afraid of what? Afraid you'll write another ending for me? I'm no longer in that book. I'm in the kitchen.
She stood there, showing an uncertain expression for the first time. She was probably used to everyone her.
You don't want to go back to the book?
No.
What if I just came for tea?
Tea is brewing. Cookies just came out of the oven. Sit.
That afternoon, Lady Blake sat in my kitchen, had a cup of black tea, and ate 2 cookies.
You're more interesting than before.
You too. Her carriage drove away. As her carriage drove away, I stood at the door, watching its dark silhouette shrink.
In the original novel, she was one of the biggest villains, but she sat in my kitchen and ate reduced sugar cookies. She didn't win. I didn't lose either. We just sat at opposite ends of the same table and each had a cup of tea.
The system updated its final line at dusk. I looked at that line, standing at the kitchen door. The dough in my hands was still warm. I placed the dough on the counter and kept kneading, new ending generating, then let it generate slowly. I won't rush it.
I wrote a letter to the original author. Not to interrogate, just to tell her I've been to the sea. It's still there. Thank you for letting her that letter. After the letter was sent, there was no reply. I didn't need a reply. She wrote a character that caused her pain, but that character left me a C. That was probably the gentlest thing she'd ever done. Alexander found the draft of that letter on my desk. After reading it, he put it back and said,
You saw the sea for her. What about yourself? What do you want to see?
I thought for a while. I haven't figured it out yet, but I have basil, a cookie recipe, and a coat. He placed that coat back on the back of my chair.
The coat won't leave. Take your time.
I sat down, draped the coat over my shoulders, picked up my pen and began writing my next diary entry. Not for anyone, just to confirm that I was indeed here. Outside the window, the rose side branches had been trimmed. No numbers ticking, no voice urging me to do anything. I wrote down a line. Day 20. I'm still here. No one has written me to death.
I started planting things in the garden. Not roses, vegetables. Tomatoes, basil, mint, a small patch of strawberries. Isabella taught me how to set up supports, and Thomas helped me loosen the soil.
Alexander stood by and watched for a while, then picked up a shovel and asked me,
Where do you need digging?
I pointed out where the tomato seeding should go. He crouched down and dug a hole, his movements awkward, but he dug earnestly, his tunise covered in mud. He had him a glass of water.
Why are you planting these?
Because things you grow yourselves taste sweeter.
Used to say the sweetest thing was chocolate.
That was before. Now I think it's things that grow from the earth, because they take time, and I don't rush them.
Are you also waiting for me to grow?
I looked at him.
You're already growing. You just don't know it.
He looked down at the row tomato smeedlings, didn't it, and asked.
But I saw him put the cup down and gently nudge a bit of soil over the roots of one tomato seedling with the tip of his shoe. The garden soil was warm. I crumbled a small clob of soil between my fingers, the crumbs falling beside the tomato seed. No quests. The system didn't pop up any notification. No countdown.
The first batch of tomatoes I planted turned red. Small, only 4 of them. I picked them and put them in a white ceramic bowl, carrying them to the kitchen.
Isabella and Thomas came, and they sat at the table. I sliced the tomatoes thinly, sprinkled a little salt and black pepper. Nothing else, just tomatoes, and placed on a plate. Alexander walked in and paused.
These are the 4 you grew?
Yes, 4, 1 piece each. He picked up his fork, took a piece, and chewed slowly.
Sweet.
I smiled. I told you, homegrown is sweeter.
Those 4 tomatoes were finished.
No juice left. Wiped clean.
That's because it was delicious.
The Alexander didn't say that was Leia as he placed his fork side the security plate, something that shouldn't be Breently. 4 tomatoes, 4 people. Just right.
I cleared the plate and put it in the sink. The water was loud, but I knew this was one of my achievements. Not the kind written in any book. It was grown by me again. The basil sprig on the windowsill had grown new leaves.
Lady Blake came again.
She wore an old coat, carried a bag of apples.
I passed the market and saw these apples looked good.
I baked an apple crisp, using the apples she brought. She sat in her usual spot, drinking tea, eating the crisp, not speaking. My son has never planted anything with his own hands. He helped me plant a row of basil yesterday. I know, his hands had mud on them.
She left. Her silhouette was a little shorter than before, and her steps weren't as quick. I washed the apple couche dish in the kitchen. Water ran through my fingers, warm.
Outside, Alexander was crouching in the garden, checking if the basil had sprouted. His hands indeed had mud. He didn't wipe them off. I stood at the window, watching him brush the soil aside with the back of his hand, leaning in close to look. His crouching posture's natural was someone of rose. The system didn't prompt, but I felt this image was worth remembering more than any system notification.
The basil sprouted, very small, 2 tender leaves poking out of the soil. As I crouched in the garden watching them, Alexander came over and crouched beside me.
You look at them 3 times a day.
Because they're alive.
He reached out and gently touched the smallest leaf with his fingertip. How big can it get?
I don't know, but I'll let it grow.
He withdrew his hand, sat on the ground, his back against the garden wall. I kept crouching, watching the basil. Sunlight fell on those 2 leaves, their edges at translucent. I looked back at him. He had his eyes closed, his face toward the sun. The shadow of his long lashes fell on his cheekbones. In the original novel, he was always frowning. At this moment, his brow was relaxed. I didn't wake him. I just turned back and kept looking at the basil.
I received an unsigned letter. Inside the envelope was only one line, E.W. Winters. The me from the original novel. The paper was old, the corners yellowed, but the handwriting was new, written in a script I didn't recognize. I sat on the windowsill holding the letter, and outside the garden basil had already grown its 4th pair of leaves. The other me, she saw the sea too. I didn't know how she saw it, or how that letter crossed the gap between pages and reality to land on my desk. But she saw it. I folded the letter and placed it in that old recipe book, between the pages about the sea. The place she wanted to go, she'd been there. I had too.
The basil has grown a bit. Do you want to come see?
I sealed the envelope through the hallway and came down from into garden. I walked. The sunlight was bright, the basil leaves swaying gently in the wind. He stood beside it, holding a watering can.
They drank a whole can today.
Then water less tomorrow. The roots will drown.
Okay.
He crouched down, set the can aside, and parted the base of the leaves to check.
They're growing.
Yes. I crouched beside him. As he brushed the soil, his pinky touched my pinky. He didn't move away. I didn't either.
The basil leaves gently touched each other in the wind, at the same frequency as our 2 fingers.
When Lady Blake came for the 3rd time, she brought a box of homemade cookies, baked by herself.
I practiced for a month.
The cookies were irregularly shaped, some edges burnt. I took one and bit into it.
Delicious. The burnt edges are even better.
She sat in the chair, her hands on her knees.
You don't have to flatter me.
I'm not flattering you. I'm telling the truth.
She looked at me, silent for a moment. I also grew things when I was young. Then I stopped. She looked at me, silent for a moment.
Why did you stop?
Because no one helped me water them.
I walked to the kitchen and refilled her teacup with.
Start again now. There's still open space in the garden. What do you want to plant?
She didn't answer. She just looked at the steam rising from the cup.
But the next morning, the butler announced, Lady Blake is in the backyard with a bag of soil and a shovel. When I went out, she was already crouched on the ground, digging a hole of moderate depth. She held a thin lavender seedling in her hand. I leaned against the doorwheel and didn't walk over. She didn't need help. She just needed a place to plant. The lavender and the basil were 3 meters apart. Lady Blake came twice a week to water her lavender, and after watering, she would stand and look at Alexander's for a while, or you're overwatering. She just looked.
The things you plant are not very orderly.
One day as she was leaving, she said, orderly is a garden, disorderly is life. I choose life.
She didn't reply, but as she passed the basil row, she reached out and gently straightened one crooked stem. The movement was very light, as if afraid to be seen. I pretended to look elsewhere.
The lavender stood quietly behind her, not yet in bloom, but its roots had writing my own story. Not a diary, but a new chapter. I decided not to follow the script. Alexander saw my manuscript one day.
You wrote this?
I wrote it.
What's the ending?
I don't know, haven't gotten there yet.
Then where have you written up to?
Up to when you helped me dig the tomato holes. He looked at me.
Then keep writing without next.
What happens next happens every day. If you wait for the end, you might wait a long time.
I'm not waiting for the process.
I took back the manuscript. The edges of the pages where he'd held them were slightly warm. I placed the manuscript on my lap and turned to the latest page written. The last sent that page read writing. I closed the manuscript. The basil swayed in the wind. The lavender bloomed quietly in the distance. I thought, maybe this story really doesn't need an ending. It just needs to be turned one page at a time, every day.
Isabella was pregnant. When she came to tell me, she sat in the kitchen chair, holding a glass of warm water.
Thomas doesn't know yet. You're the first
Stopped my hand on the heddle handle.
Then I'm the first who'll make you pickles.
Can you make sour ones?
I can learn.
She smiled. Her face was rounder than a year ago, and the curve of her mouth was wider. I remembered how in the original novel she was always crying. Crying when framed, crying when pushed away by the male thief, crying when misunderstood by the whole world. But at this moment she sat in my kitchen laughing. Not a trace of tears. Thomas will jump for joy. He'll jump right through the roof, she said. Then I'll buy you a new roof. We sat there laughing for a while.
Outside the window, sunlight filtered through the basil leaves, casting dappled, and later said he'd heard our laughter as he passed the kitchen. He didn't come in, just stood in the hallway listening for a few seconds. Why didn't in?
That laughter wasn't for me. I didn't want to interrupt.
I looked at him for a while, then said, "Next time you can come in, laughter can be for you too." He placed his hand on the kitchen doorway, didn't answer but didn't walk away either. His hand stayed there, not leaving, not entering, just present.
Do you want children?
I put down my book.
Why are you asking?
Isabella is pregnant. I was wondering if you might want that too.
I thought about it. I don't know, but right now I have basil, tomatoes, lavender, and a manuscript. That's enough to keep me busy.
He didn't press.
But later he dug an extra small plot in the backyard, without planting anything, just loosening the soil and leaving it there.
Who is that plot for?
For whatever you want to plant later.
That empty plot stayed empty, but every time I passed by I saw that its soil was loose, moist, ready to receive any seed at any time. He'd been maintaining it all along.
Lady Blake's lavender grew its first flower stake. Very small, pale purple, hidden among the leaves. She crouched before it for a long time. Then she stood up, brushed the dirt off her knees, walked into the kitchen and said, "It bloomed."
Congratulations. I poured her a cup of tea.
She held the teacup. I've planted lavender before, but I never waited for it to bloom. This time I waited for one. Thank you for leaving a plot for me.
The land is yours. I just didn't fill it all up.
She didn't speak again, but I saw her hand pause on the cup. Not nervousness, but something lighter, like the wind pausing to confirm it had just blown. Outside the window, the lavender spurk swayed gently in the wind. I held my tea and watched with her for a while. That flower was small, but it bloomed. Unrelated to the system, unrelated to the script. It just bloomed. I started accepting that my existence in this world was real. Not as the original villainess, but as someone who could bake cookies, grow tomatoes, and count carriages from the windowsill. That old woman who wrote the book said you're not real, but Lady Blake sitting in my kitchen was real. The baby in Isabella's womb was real. The dew on the basil leaves was real. If these were real, then I was real too.
I wrote in my diary, I am real, because someone helped me hold up the crooked stems. That night as Alexander passed by the windowsill, I called out to him. I confirmed something today.
What?
I am real.
You just realized?
I know.
So what do you think now?
I'm thinking, tomorrow I should turn over the soil in that empty plot again.
I'll help you.
Okay.
He turned and took 2 steps.
When you said I am real, you smiled.
Because I really am. He didn't ask again, but I saw that as he walked back to his low rooms, as if he too were confirming something. Isabella's child was born, a daughter. She named her Lily. When I went to the hospital to see her, she lay on the white bed, holding a tiny wrinkled little person. Lily's fists were clenched tight, as if grasping something invisible. She looks like you. How does she look like me? She clenches her fists. You used to be like that too. Then you learned to let go.
I looked down at Lily's tiny fist.
Then she'll learn too. No rush.
Thomas stood beside her, his eyes still red. He extended a finger, and Lily grabbed it.
She's so strong.
Yes, she'll grow up slowly.
Alexander stood at the door, not coming in, but he peeked through the gap. That scene was quiet. Isabella laughing, Thomas in a daze, Lily gripping a finger.
When I left the hospital, Alexander was waiting for me in the hallway.
You smiled just now.
Yes. Because Lily grabbed my finger.
Do you want to go back and see her again?
Tomorrow. She just arrived today. Let her get used to this world first.
And you? Are you used to this world?
Getting used to it, a little more every day.
The window at the end of the hallway was open, and outside the basil in the garden swayed in the wind. I walked and curled my fingers into my palm, clenching once just like Lily, then I let go.
I started teaching Lily's godmother to bake cookies. Isabella chose Alexander.
You're the person Ella works with most often, so you're the godmother.
Godmothers are usually female.
Then you're the godfather. Either way, you need to learn to bake cookies, Lily.
He looked down, tied on the apron, and walked to the counter.
Knead it, until it's no longer sticky.
I handed him a ball of dough. He kneaded slowly, seriously.
When can she eat cookies?
2 years from now.
Then I still have time to practice.
You have plenty of time.
He placed the ball on the tray, stepped back half a step, and looked at it.
Is this right?
Yes.
Then what?
Then wait for it to bake. He wiped his hands on the apron, flour smagging onto the gray fabric.
I've never kneaded dough before.
You just did.
It feels pretty good.
That he himself paused for a moment, as if not used to it pretty good. I didn't laugh at him. I slid the second tray into the oven, closed the door, and leaned against the counter waiting for him to speak. He didn't spoke again, kitchen, but he stood mid until the first batch came out.
On Lily's 1-month celebration, I set out 6 plates of cookies and a pitcher of lemonade on the garden table. Isabella sat on the bench holding Lily, while Thomas held an umbrella to block the sun. Lady Blank sat in another chair, holding that lavender speak that had bloomed. She'd cut it and brought it. Alexander stood by the table, holding a glass of lemonade, a bit of flour on his cuff. I stood at the other end of the table, watching everyone sitting together in the same garden, with a table of cookies between them. In the original novel, these people should have been tearing at each other, crying, hating. But now Lily was asleep in Isabella's arms. Lady Blake was discussing with Thomas how to winter-ripe lavender, and Alexander was cutting lemons for me. The wind passed through the garden, the basil leaves gently touching. I picked up a cookie and took a bite, lemon-flavored. Sweet. I sat down at the far end of that long table. No one called me, no one rushed me. I just sat there, with the people I chose. Lily moved her finger in her sleep, and Isabella looked down at her. Lady Blake placed the lavender on the corner of the table. Alexander put the sliced lemons into the pitcher. I sat there and counted. 6 plates of cookies, 5 adults, 1 baby. The numbers were just right.
I started writing the ending of the new story not for anyone to see, just for myself. The ending had no grandiosation, no lavish wedding, no confession dialogue. Only a long table. I put the manuscript back in the drawer, alongside that old recipe book.
Are you done writing?
I'm done.
What's the ending?
The ending is me kneading dough in the kitchen, and someone knocking at the door.
Who's the person at the door?
You.
Did I come in?
He stood in the kitchen doorway, still holding that apron. I looked down and kept kneading, not looking up at him, but he didn't leave. He leaned against the door hole, quietly watching me finish kneading a ball of dough.
I put it into a bowl and covered it with a damp cloth. Then I looked up. He was still there.
Sunlight streamed in through the window behind him, casting his shadow across the kitchen tiles, long, reaching all the way to my feet. I lifted my foot and stepped on the tip of his shadow.
He looked down, then smiled. That was the first time I saw him smile, not a sneer, not a chuckle, but a smile that slowly loosened from a pressed line. The system showed nothing, but that smile stayed in my memory, longer than any system notification. I received a second letter, still from EW. This time the letter had only one line. I saw the tomatoes you grow. No address, no date. I turned the paper over, and on the back was a small red tomato drawn. The lines were casual, the edges a little rough, but the color was filled in thoroughly. I stuck it on the kitchen windsill, next to the glass with the basil sprig.
A little to lied. Alexander was helping Lady Blake repot
A little the lavender.
He did as told. The sunlight was bright. I stood inside the windowsill, watching them. That tomato drawn on paper and the tomato growing in the soil outside together. Both red. One on paper, one in reality, but both had been drawn, and both had been grown.
I took that paper with the tomato drawing down from the windowsill, turned it over, and added a line below EW's words. I'll plant again next year. Then I stuck the paper back on the windowsill, using the basil glass to weigh down one corner. Wind slipped through the window crack, and the paper puffed slightly, as if breathing.
Lily turned one. She started walking, unsteadily, grabbing onto things every few steps. Isabella brought her to the garden to practice on the grass. She took 1 step, 2 steps, 3, then plopped down on her bottom. She didn't cry, she looked around and was laughing. Thomas was applauding. I was crouching 2 meters away. Lily saw me, reached out a hand, as if to say, "Come here."
I walked over and crouched before her. She used my knees to stand up, then reached out her other hand. She was holding a basil leaf in her palm. She handed me the leaf, like offering a gift. I took the leaf. It was warm, wrinkled, warmed by her palm.
Thank you.
She grinned. Only 2 teeth, but that smile was complete. Isabella watched this scene nearby, her eyes moistening. She didn't wipe them. Thomas walked over and put his arm around her shoulder. Alexander sat on the stone bench in the garden, not coming over, but when I looked back, I saw him looking at the basil leaf in my hand. His lips moved, like a word unsaid. I put the leaf in my pocket, stood up, and walked back to sit on the bench. Lily fell again. This time, she let out a whimper, but didn't cry. She got up and kept walking. I made a little picture book for Lily, not a real book, just a few pages stapled together, with drawings of things from the garden: basil, tomatoes, lavender, lemon trees. She flipped through it earnestly, her finger pointing at each page, making babbling sounds.
When she pointed to the tomato page, I said tomato. She repeated a sound, not quite right, but she was learning.
You're teaching her to speak.
She's teaching me to see. Lily held up the picture book, covering her face. She peeked over the top edge, looking at me. I reached out and gently lowered the book, revealing her face. Her face was round, her nose tiny, but when she looked at me, there was no fear in her eyes. She could learn the words I taught slowly, but what she was born with, that trust, she brought it herself. Alexander sat at the other end of the living room, holding a document, but he wasn't reading it. He was watching us. I noticed his gaze landed on Lily's book, on the basil page. He recognized that it was the variety we grew in our garden, the leaf shape drawn quite accurately. I pushed the book slightly toward him. He put down the decumation, walked over, and crouched beside Lily. Lily handed him the book. On the second page, his finger stopped on the lavender page. He looked at it for a long time.
Lady Blake came out of the kitchen with a cup of tea, and as she passed, she looked down.
The drawing is prettier than what I planted,
she said, then kept walking. Her tea was steaming. We didn't call her to stop, but she slowed her pace.
Now I sit on the garden bench. The basil has grown into a large clump, the tomatoes have borne several batches, the lavender bloomed, faded, and in the nearby empty plot wall Whitney Blake has newly planted lilies on the backyard grass. Isley runs faster than before, her pigtails swinging in the air.
Alexander sits beside me, a book open on his lap, but he's not turning pages. He's watching Lily. Lady Blake comes out of the kitchen with a cup of tea and pauses as she passes us.
The mint has grown tall.
Can be brewed for tea now.
She nods, continues walking, and sits down on another chair. The wind blows from the direction of the sea.
I'm not counting carriages. I'm not acting out any script. I'm just sitting here. The people around haven't left.
I look down and see my hands. Flour dust on my fingers, traces of soil, a faint green stain from basil leaves. Those hands had never planted anything a year ago. Now they've planted tomatoes, supported lavender, kneaded dough, and received a leaf passed from Lily's hand.
You're writing stories again.
I'm not writing. I have no pen, no paper in my hands. But he's also right, because every time I sit here watching this garden, I'm continuing to write, just not with a pen, with every day. My name is Ella Winters. I cross-through no quests, no one dictating who I should love, hate, or harm.
I just walk into the garden every day, watching the basil grow, the lavender bloom, Lily run. That empty plot is still there, the soil loose and moist, ready to accept any new seed at any time. I'll sit beside this land I've turned myself, watching the wind, until it grows the next thing I haven't yet named.
Lily falls while chasing the ball, and this time she cries. Isabella runs over, crouches down, and picks her up. Lily's sobs muffle into Isabella's shoulder, quickly fading into whimpers. Alexander puts down his book, stands up, walks over, and pulls a handkerchief from his pocket to hand to Isabella. Isabella takes it and wipes the tears and mud from Lily's face. Lily lifts her face from her mother's shoulder, sees Alexander, and reaches out to touch the corner of his handkerchief. Her fingers still have mud on them, leaving a small brown fingerprint on Alexander's white handkerchief. He looks down, and doesn't wipe it off. He folds the handkerchief and puts it back in his pocket, then turns and walks back to sit down. After he sits, I turn my head and look at him.
The handkerchief is dirty.
It'll wash out.
That's yours.
Now it's hers too.
The wind blows again, carrying the lavender scent a short distance. Lily has stopped crying. She slips down from Isabella's arms and runs after the ball again. Lady Blake places her teacup on her lap and closes her eyes, sparkling. I lean back against the bench, resting my hands on my knees. Alexander doesn't turn pages. He doesn't speak either. He just sits beside me, watching Lily run far away and then come back. The basil sways in the wind. The molt slowly takes root in the soil. That empty plot remains empty, the soil soft. I don't know what I'll plant next. But I'm not in a hurry. After all, when the wind blows from the sea, every leaf in this garden is growing.